This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Reeya Banerjee for the first time on the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. We love to talk to people who are creative. As I said, we started this podcast talking to emerging singer-songwriters back in 2016, so this is our original purpose, and we love to talk to creative people. Being a musician myself, I love to talk to artists. And so you're an unsigned independent musician, which I am myself. And I do appreciate
Yay.
that space. So I think we'll have a good time talking. A couple of things I ask any guest before we get to the heart of your story is like what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Ooh, wow, getting deep already. What motivates me and why it's kind of the same answer. I have been through a lot of stuff in my life. That's really putting it mildly. I've dealt with, mental illness issues and grief and, a lot of things that I think now people are more comfortable talking openly about that stuff. When I was growing up, not so much. So I do this, and what motivates me is I try to be the person that I wish I had been able to look up to when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
In the stories I tell through my music, and also I do some creative writing as well, memoir writing. So that's it. That's the double answer. I'm trying to be that for somebody else because I didn't have that when I was growing up.
I think that's an awesome place to start because when I talk to creative people, I always want to ask like, what is the permission structure that allowed you to create? Because a lot of people will say like they can't do it. You meet a lot of people who aren't creatives and they say, well, I can't possibly write a song or do a
I know that
painting
too.
or be an actor. And, when people are creatives, there's a point in your life where you're like, yeah, I can take this idea and I can throw it out into the world. And even though it's my baby,
Hmm.
and people might not react to it, I still have built up enough a little bit of armor that I'll keep on going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. It's funny you say that, a lot of people think, oh, I can't do it. I don't even know where to begin. That was very much my story when I started out. I mean, when I first started playing music, I was kind of doing like the bar band circuit, playing lots of classic rock, which I love. I love,
Mhm.
Beatles, Stones, Zeppelin, all that stuff. It's fun. And I always wanted to do original music. And I had a lot of friends who were singer-songwriters, and I'd be talking to them about how do you approach writing? Well, how do you think about it? And they were like, well, you've been doing this a long time. Why aren't you doing this? And I was like, I just don't know how. And a friend of mine, his name is Jonathan Frith. He's an amazing singer songwriter. He just told me one day, he was like, you just have to do it. You just have to sit down and do it. It sounds hard, but it's not. You just have to sit down and do it. And he said, and you're a writer anyway. So you've got it in there. You just have to do it. And even still, I was like, oh, I don't know. So I've had a lot of supporters and mentors and just friends who've done a lot of pushing me along the way. And I'm grateful for that because imposter syndrome is a very real thing. So
Yeah, I mean, I remember. I mean, I started because I was in public school, and they
mhm,
gave me one of those like recorders, and
of
then
course.
I ended up picking up like clarinet, and
Oh,
then I
cool.
in the clarinet I got as far as like the jazz band, the marching band. I got won awards for being like a clarinet, and I was like the leader of my section. Then, I'm a child of the '70s, and MTV came along,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
my brother was 7 years older, so he was listening to Zeppelin,
Of
he was
course.
listening to Hendrix, he listened to Pink Floyd, but I was listening to my mom who was playing like the Carpenters, and my dad
Mhm.
was playing like James Brown. So my whole house was getting hit with multiple genres.
That's
Even
awesome.
even like Johnny Cash. My mom was from Morgantown, West Virginia, so she was playing Johnny Cash and the Carpenters, and so there was this permission structure that music was cool. My dad
Yep.
actually would turn off the TV every Saturday night and just listen to jazz or listen to James with no
I love
TV
that.
on, and gave us
Love
an
that.
appreciation for actually diving into albums. And so that
Yeah.
kind of gave me like the permission structure to be a fan
Yeah.
and
Oh,
respect
yeah.
music and we respect musicians. And then start to say, well, why can't I do that too? Why, I'm reading off the page, playing in these, at school,
Mhm.
but like I'm watching MTV, I'm listening to stuff my brother's into, and like, hey, I got some ideas now too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I love hearing that because I had a similar, experience growing up. My both of my parents were, I don't want to say they were musicians, but they were big music appreciators. My dad played violin when he was young, and he still likes to brag that he was first chair in his high school orchestra, first chair violinist. Um, and and my mother, actually, she studied. She was trained vocally in the Indian classical tradition. She grew up in New Delhi. Ravi Shankar was a family friend. That's my
That's
one
awesome.
name drop of the night. So,
Yeah, I know.
so
Yeah, that's awesome. Beatle
yeah,
history.
yeah. So she's both very, very talented and music lovers. And then again, my mom loved the Beatles. And if you want to, if you really want to say what my origin story was as a musician, it was my mother playing. She had all of the
Love
Beatles
the
records.
Beatles. Yeah,
Yep,
well,
all of the
there.
records. Yeah, and then my dad was a bit of a folky. He taught himself how to play guitar. He was one of those. He was like, I know how to play violin. This is another string instrument. Let me see what I can do.
Yeah, yeah, that's
So
cool.
he kind of
That's
taught
always
himself.
awesome.
Yeah, and so Paul Simon, James Taylor, Peter, Paul, and Mary, like all of those
Well, the
classics.
singer-songwriter period. Like I love about the
Exactly.
70s is that, and Dylan. Like I'm a big
Yeah,
Dylan in the band. Like
yeah.
I
Oh yeah,
listen, I
yeah.
like
Me
all
too.
the basement tapes, like every single one, everything that Robbie and the boys did with him. And
Yeah,
it was just the idea that Dylan,
yeah,
what he would do. And I was very much into those basement tapes because I was
yeah,
like, here's like the ultimate basement band, that Big Pink in the basement, just crafting hundreds of these songs. And I'm
yeah,
like, and the fact that he would just like write like that, just
yeah,
come up with these stories and
yeah,
come up with these ideas. And it's like he's like coming up with these things like in this Americana kind of like mythology that he's making up.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
like, this is super interesting to me that you can have this space as a writer. And
yeah.
I love
Absolutely.
like reading, but I like about being a songwriter is that you can take like like what an author does with a book, and you can do it in 5 minutes, 4 minutes,
Yes. Oh,
eight
that's a
minutes.
great analogy. I love that.
You can help create this whole little world, but it's like shorter. And
Yeah.
and and I find that limitation causes you to create in a different way. And I was wondering, as a songwriter, how do you like think about that?
That's a great way of putting it. That's something that I even, before I got into music as a creative writer, I liked short form. I still like short form stories and memoir pieces, because I agree with you, having constraints, having limitations, having a page limit, or having a, like, this song is going to be no longer than 3 minutes and 27 seconds long. Let's go. And that kind of forces you, it helps creativity, because it helps you start to really hone in on what is the story I am trying to tell right now, and like throughout all the extraneous stuff, and like, oh, I'd love to throw this thing in or this line in, but does
Yeah,
it really make sense? Is it really going to serve the story, or is it just, I think it's cool, and like, what is the actual big picture? What am I trying to say in this 3 minutes and 27 seconds or whatever it is? So I wanted to ask you, you're talking about Bob Dylan. What did you think of the movie with
oh, I
Timothy?
just think it's. I mean, I like the whole story. So this is a very early part of the story.
Sure.
I thought it accurately captured what I had read, and I have
Yeah.
like tons of stuff. And I
Yeah.
watched the Scorsese film,
Oh,
the
yes, I
big
love that one
Scorsese
too. Yeah.
documentary. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's this snapshot of this period. But
Right.
I'm really into the period when he went like with the band and got booed,
Yeah.
and so we didn't get to really get to too far. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm hoping they do more because there's a whole
Yeah.
story to tell there. And I understand they wanted to start at the beginning, but like certain periods, I kind
Yeah.
of prefer certain periods, but that's my thing.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of his Traveling Wilburys era as well. I love the
But he'd
Traveling
always
Wilburys.
reinventing himself. People thought he was
Yeah.
done, and then he'd
Yeah.
come back. Then
Yeah.
he's over. I remember like when he did, like Infidels. Like he had
Yeah.
gone through this period where people thought he was done. Like he hadn't
Yeah.
created anything. Like he kind of fell off, went this born again Christian period, and people didn't like it.
That's
And then
right.
when
That's
did
right.
Infidels, and it's like boom, he like
Yeah.
suddenly came back. And it's like wow, he can still write really
Yeah.
biting stuff, and
Yeah.
he still does that, and that's always like it amazed me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's just, I would love to look in his brain. It's a weird thing to say, but just to just see how it works.
It was interesting. I had a guy who actually was a recording engineer that worked on Blood on the Tracks, the original version of the album, before the people came in and actually added the overdubs.
Yeah.
And he said the problem with, well, there wasn't a problem, but the way Dylan works is he would constantly reinvent the song. So in the recording studio,
Mhm.
he'd have these musicians with him, and he kept on changing the structure, changing the
Yeah,
lyrics, and you have to be able to kind of keep up with that. Like, well, but the band could do that. Not
sure.
every
Yeah,
band can do that. Like, so he
yeah.
actually would have to get new guys coming in because they couldn't stick with this kind of stream of consciousness style
Right,
of,
right.
yeah, maybe in this moment this is what's right, but
Yeah.
in this next moment it's not right, so we're gonna do this. So I wonder, like, as a writer, like, always when I get into people who are songwriters and you're writing your lyrics and then you're writing the instrumental pieces that go with it.
Mhm.
What comes first, or does every song kind of come from a different place? Like, whatever serves the song. Like, lyrics come first in this one, maybe it doesn't happen in the next one. It works a different way.
That's a great question. I will say that for me, I'll often have like lyric ideas, but it's often like weird spitballing free verse, nothing rhymes. I'm just kind of like, this is sort of the essence of what I'm trying to say. And then I try to narrow that down into something digestible. And then I have two really great collaborators I've worked with over the years. One is Luke Folger, and he produced both of my records, including the one that's coming out later this summer. And then another buddy of mine I've known for 10 years, James Rubino, and they both have helped me sort of shape my sound. And so there's a lot of, in talking about the record that I have coming out this summer, just for context, I studied film when I was in college. And so I kind of had like an overall concept of what I wanted the record to be about. So I kind of started top down. I'm like looking at it like a frame, like what is the movie of this record?
Oh, you're
And
just
then
thinking about
like,
it in terms of an album and then bringing it down
yeah, and then bringing
from
it
there,
down, down, down. And then what do I want each song, what do I want each song to say? What story is each song saying? And how do they all fit together
like a
as
Sergeant
one
Pepper's
cohesive?
or like a Pink Floyd, like, yeah, but like, the mindset of like in the 70s or the 60s, like, the Beatles created the idea of the album
Yeah.
being an
Yeah.
art form. And
Yeah.
today we're kind of in the world of the single.
The single,
I
right.
still I
Exactly.
still think in terms of albums because
That's
that's my
how I think about it too, and that's how that's how I was approaching even my first record. It was similar. It was a little bit, that one was a little bit more, it wasn't as structured. This one I very clearly, like, I had a story I wanted to tell. I was thinking about all of the places that I've lived in. I grew up, I moved around a lot as a kid, and then I ended up in New York, and I stayed in New York for 20 years, and just, but I moved around in New York, and just, it was kind of thinking about how all of these places I've lived in have had an impact on me. But it's not really about like, oh, I grew up in San Francisco and there was fog and it was cold in the summer, like nothing. It's not about that. It was more about kind of honing in on like, what is the core emotion of what I remember about my time living there. So, we talk about the big frame, which is, personal geography, let's call it that. That's like the
yeah,
frame. And then it was sort of like honing down, which location am I thinking about now, and what is the core, like, memory or the core emotion I associate
like
with
there
that.
each town the town has a color
Exactly.
or a feel. Like, if you think of like
Exactly.
a filmmaker, I always talk about in terms of, music, sound painting. I mean, because
Yeah.
I'm a synthesis, so
Yeah.
I play with waveforms. I spend
Yeah.
a lot of time on my Moog just coming up with the tone before I even write the song.
Yeah.
So I'm coming up
Yeah.
with a brand new tone, like a
Yeah.
guitar player, like playing with their pedals and playing with all the different things that you can affect a guitar. You can have it clean, or you could layer all these effects on it, like the Edge or something, or like
Yeah.
Hendrix. And so it's
Yeah.
like I think about creating that tone before I even create the song itself. But the color of music, like, you can
Hmm.
sound paint, you can
Yeah.
like you go to a canvas and you put something down, there's a lot of things that you can kind of cross pollinate or affect, like when you're mixing colors. You can
Absolutely.
mix sounds. I purposely could create like an oscillator that's slightly detuned and then put a
Hmm.
layer on it and a one that's a detuned slightly another way, and just keep on layering different oscillator tones. And then with the full picture of that tone is only revealed after you have all of them kind of layered on top of each other. I mean,
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
goes toward telling a story from the sound, not even the lyrics,
Yeah.
but and tell it
Yeah.
with sound.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's, and so when we were kind of writing these songs, I was talking with Luke, that my producer, and he's also a composer. And so there was a lot of, I was talking with him. I was like, these are sort of the free verse lyric spitballing that I'm working on, and here's the core emotion of this location. And then he and I would kind of brainstorm a little bit and come up with like, what is the right feel for there's a song there. I mentioned San Francisco. I grew up in San Francisco. There's a song about San Francisco, but a lot of it is about sort of my ambivalence about living there. I can elaborate or not later on. And so kind of,
Hmm.
just like ambivalence and confusion. And then, and my mother was sick for a lot of my childhood. She was very sick when we were living there. She ended up, man, I'm really bringing the mood down here. She passed away when I was 12.
Oh, wow.
And so it's sort of like we came up with this sort of, it's almost like a musical merry-go-round sort of feeling, but it's kind of off. It's kind of uncomfortable. It's kind of a little dissonant. So it's this idea of like you're on this, musical, and it's supposed to be great. It's cool. We're in California, but it's also just like everything's off and
Oh,
uncomfortable and horrible.
discordant. Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
sometimes you use discordance and distortion
yeah,
and noise and, things that are a little off. Like I was saying, like you can make an oscillator off on purpose. You can
exactly. Yep.
actually detune it to actually, like if it was a perfect harmony, it
Mhm.
it has a different meaning. And so as a
Right.
writer, sometimes you go into something that might be jarring, that might
Yeah.
be like hard to take, right? It might be
Yes.
something that's not as harmonious as something, like if you get that, like
That's
somebody that
giving.
actually tells something hard,
Yeah.
it makes you
Yeah.
have to think, or it's layered and it has a lot of meaning, or it's like where you can't really, you're talking about an anti-hero, but you're supposed to still like deal with the fact that like are they valid in their intentions? Well,
Right.
you want to be able to tell a story different ways. You don't always want to make it like a
Yeah.
cartoon.
Yeah. No, exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. So yeah,
I,
that's a lot of how like, so like I was saying, I kind of, with this album, is it was sort of top down frame. What's the story? What's the movie? What are the little chapters in the movie? And then it was a lot of like, okay, here's my core emotion. What does that emotion sound like? Kind of working with Luke on like how to put together, like, what does ambivalence and sadness sound like together, like those two emotions together. And we came up with that kind of like confusing, dissonant, merry-go-round kind of thing. There's another song that we wrote together that is sort of about, my experiences working. My first job out of college, I worked at a resort in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains, and so it was very, like kind of ethereal and twinkly and sort of, like, kind of trying to capture the feeling, or the feeling of being like in the night in the Catskills and watching the stars, and how do you convey that musically in this kind of
mm,
sort of twinkling, kind of warm twinkling way. And that's just, it's super fun to, because I don't know how. It's funny because this is the way I have always heard and listened to music, and also just, as somebody who is a writer outside of being a songwriter and who studied film, like I kind of look at everything. This is going to sound very weird, but I look at everything as like, it's almost like everything is text. And when I say it's text, it's you're interpreting imagery. That
yeah.
imagery is either written down on a piece of paper, or it's, being fed to you quite literally on a movie screen, or you're hearing it with your ears, but it's all imagery. It's all about creating imagery and the feelings that you elicit with that imagery. So that's how
I
I.
think music is great compared to film because film is kind of prejudging, well, it's kind of giving you this image, and
Yeah.
they have your director has an intention. Now, you might not have the same, like, basically response to that. It might be
Right.
not what his intention was, but with music, you can build. People get, the music becomes very important to people
Yeah.
because they get these like snapshots of emotional
Yeah.
responses.
Yeah.
And when they hear it again, it brings up that snapshot in their head or it brings up a variation of it. And so everybody gets to kind of own your music, right?
Exactly.
And they get
Exactly.
to interpret it. Now you have your idea, like you build your sound painting or you build your album. It could be like a rock opera or it could be kind of not linear.
Yeah.
It might not be sequential, but it still is cohesive as a project. So like
Yeah.
Sergeant Pepper isn't like Pink Floyd. It isn't telling like the wall a story,
Right.
but
Right.
it still seems like it's a statement and
Yes.
everything fits
Yeah.
together. So
Yeah.
is your thing more like a Sergeant Pepper or like the wall?
Oh, it mine. I would say it sounds so crazy to be like, yeah, I'm like Pink Floyd. Mine is a little bit more like the Wall, in that it is. there is like a definite, like a beginning and an end kind of
Mhm.
thing that I'm doing with the story of the record. You know, that just ended up being how I envisioned this one. I would
Mhm.
say my first record was not as structured. My first record, if we're gonna compare me to brilliant musicians that probably I have no business comparing myself to, my first record was probably more of a Sergeant Pepper. There was like
Mhm.
a theme maybe, but then you know
Lush,
there were
but
some.
it kind of works together, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's like you could kind of loosely group everything. You know, there's a theme going on there, but everything was a little bit of a standalone. And I'm not the songs on my new record are also standalone, but
But they work
I
together.
really want people to sit down and listen to it end to end. That's
Because it
my.
shows yeah, because that's what I think is missing from the audience today is the ability well, like, if you get a audience that understands you, like a
Mhm.
law of attraction, because,
Yeah,
like, being in the independent space, we independent artists, we still will do things like albums or
yeah,
concept albums or projects that are a little
yeah,
bit more daring,
yeah.
maybe require more of the listener than the average thing going on in the kind of common world of art today in
You got
music.
that freedom. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
'cause like you wanna challenge people. Not that
Yeah,
you wanna make it hard, but you wanna just not you don't wanna be a cookie cutter clone of
exactly,
whatever's going on in the top 20. Like,
exactly.
you have
Absolutely.
something to say, and
Mhm.
you feel like you wanna say it, and you're hoping that people will, get drawn to
Right,
what you're putting out there, that you're throwing in the
right.
ether, and you want people to connect to it.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about being unlabeled. I have friends who are like, "Oh, wouldn't you want to have the budget and the resources and the publicity and all that?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but then someone's going to be breathing down my neck and saying, okay, you got to put your next single out now." And
And
you
then
know,
you gotta
people
play that song over and over for the next
exactly,
6 months to a
exactly.
year until
Yeah,
you suddenly might not like it anymore.
exactly. Or, you know, like, hey, your songs are a little bit too sad. Can't you perk it up a little bit? Can't you put
Yeah.
out a bunch of like fluffy, happy, you know, and like that's I have some happy songs, but there's more to me than just
It's
that.
like
I don't want to put out
James
fluff.
Taylor, when he wrote some happy songs, maybe he was in a happier place, it didn't work as well with his
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah.
Sometimes people, I don't know, pain, it isn't that it's a selling point, but it's like, I think if you're a good writer and you can
Hmm.
convey emotion,
Hmm.
whatever their emotion is, if you can convey it through your work, people get
Yeah.
drawn to that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's, I mean, all good art is, you know, if it moves somebody, then you've succeeded. You know, whether it moves them to tears or happiness or
Yeah,
just they're thinking
like a
about it.
funk artist, like, we did Lost Sly. Like,
Mhm.
funk has a
Yeah.
way of, it's on the beat, people get into movement. But with
Yeah.
funk, you can kind of do some duality. You
Yeah.
could go and do like a riot's going on. You could say something political, but you can be funky.
Yep. Exactly. You can
But you
dance to
could
it.
some people might not fully understand your lyrics, but they like the beat.
Right. Right.
So you can kind of be a little like it's a little trickery going on. It's like you
Yeah.
could have
Well,
something saying something, but everybody doesn't have to buy into exactly what you're saying. You know,
exactly. But it's a little subversive. You get people who are dancing along to a record and they don't realize they're dancing along to a political statement. I mean, that's what I love about Sly is
yeah.
that,
Well, like
you know,
even like Springsteen was born in the USA. There's some people think that that's a big like
oh yeah,
thing,
like a
but it's like
patriotic. Yeah.
I'm the long gone daddy of the USA. I'm coming back from Vietnam, and things aren't going right.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
be born in the
That's,
USA, they say, "Oh, he's being like patriotic slogans." Like that's not what it is.
that's
But
not
some
wise at
people
all.
don't hear the whole thing, and that's
Yeah.
fine because that's what people do. But I
I,
think being subversive is interesting.
yeah, I was lucky enough to see his Bruce's Broadway run, and he played
Oh,
the
wow.
original version of Born in the USA that he originally wanted it to be, and it was in a minor key, and it was very much a protest song, like very very explicitly. I mean,
Yeah.
like same lyrics, but very different mood, very different feel. You know, it's like very like just him and a guitar, singer songwriter. You know, like
Like a
it kind of
Nebraska
had that Bob
version.
Dylan sort of feel, and it was dark. And and anybody who's a Bruce Springsteen fan knows that that song isn't
Yeah, you know
actually a
what it
patriot,
is. It's like, when you
but it
listen to
was
Nebraska, like he's going back
yeah,
to his like roots, toning
exactly,
it down. Sometimes you have to pull things out. That's why I always was
yeah,
very interested because I spent a lot of time with a lot of multi tracks I do a lot of expansive type of stuff that's like very experimental. But sometimes I'll go and I'll pare it down. Like I might have something that went 16, 24 tracks, and I say, you know what, it's too much. And I
Yeah.
start pulling the tracks out, kind of like a Prince. Like when
Yeah.
Dogecoin pulled the bass line out. Prince was famous for like doing these very elaborate tracks and then start pulling things out
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the point where they became almost like demos. And people would
Right.
say, well, that's more like a demo, but then he would go and be very adventurous and actually put it out without the
Right.
bass, without the
Right.
overdubs. And then people were like, well, that's not finished. He's like, yeah, it is. I think it's interesting because sometimes less is more. But it depends on what serves the song. Sometimes you want a Phil Spector moment, you want that wall of sound, and you do it.
Right. Right.
Other
Right.
times you want to kind of be a little bit more delicate and vulnerable and have more space.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That's very much, and it's funny you say that about pulling things out and having more space. That was a conversation that Luke and I had when we were looking to, my first record came out. It's called The Way Up. It came out in 2022, and there's a little bit of everything in there sonically. It was very cool. He's got a very creative mind, and so I was, like he would come up with these cool ideas. We would I'd listen to them, I'd give him feedback, and there was a lot of stuff going on in that record to the point where when we tried to figure out how to play it live, we were like, can we play this live? Because there's just so much going on. And so we were looking at the second record. We weren't necessarily writing it to be like, okay, let's write this so we make sure we can do it on stage. But we were sort of, as collaborators, like working together on kind of evolving and moving forward and trying to raise the bar in terms of what we're creating. The idea of less is more definitely came into play of like, okay, maybe let's pull things out. Let's leave some space. Let's let the chorus take up more of the space so people can hear the words and not all the other crazy stuff going on, because the lyrics are carrying the story right now, and everything else should be in service to that,
the story. Yeah, that's
story.
always the interesting thing with like once you write a song and then you get into the engineering space.
Yeah.
And then you start making choices like what you want to emphasize. And I've run into that all the time. It's like, it's like you go and you add a bunch of tracks and they say, well, you know what? It's actually better if I pull some of this stuff out. And then you might have some things that, well, then you're kind of left open.
Yeah.
And there might be something that's maybe just a little off, but you know what? It's okay. Because if you go back in like old recordings from the 70s and 60s, you really listen, they're more error, like what people would call like maybe errors today compared to what you do in a DAW.
Sure. Yeah.
There's stuff that you could have fixed. Like
Right.
Todd Rundgren was real famous for it's like this stuff I could have fixed, but I didn't fix it because like it's better if it's like I leave it there.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's what makes it sound cool. That's what I love that.
That's half the battle. He's like that's the happy accident or not the perfection trap.
Yep.
I am very much into like happy accidents, and maybe version 101 of this demo is actually not as impactful as version 4 or 5.
Exactly.
I've actually kind of destroyed it.
Yeah.
And maybe I want to go back to be more bare bones.
Yeah.
Back to the original intent of the song, because suddenly I've lost the script.
Yeah.
I've like gone off track.
Yeah, absolutely. When during lockdown, my buddy James and I just like as a way to keep ourselves from going crazy from boredom, we just started playing around with like, what are our favorite songs? What are some songs that we like? Let's cover them, but like the idea is not to do a straight cover. Let's reinvent them a little bit and like
that's
try to tell a different story. And one of the songs we did was Sooner or Later, One of Us Must Know, Bob Dylan from Blonde on, which is one of my favorite songs. And I wanted to do a really like, my initial idea was like pared way, way, way down, like pare it way down, take it down. You're going to hear a lot about Bruce and Bob when I talk, because they're two touchstones of mine. There's a little clip floating around on YouTube of a sound check from the Tunnel of Love tour where Bob used Sooner or Later as his sound check. And it's just got this, it's very simple, stripped down. You got Max like just coming out on the downbeat and, Roy playing the keys. And it's just very delicate and very, and I was like, I want to capture that vibe.
That kind of feel. Yeah, that kind of vibe.
Exactly. And then we got, But I'm sorry. We got excited though, because we were like, okay, it's COVID. We were working remotely. We're, kind of recording parts separately and putting them together. James was putting them together. We got a friend to do like a keyboard part. We were like, hey, think like Roy Battan, do something that would make sense. That would sound like something he would do. And then we just kind of got a little hyper. We were like, we got a guy who knows how to play slide guitar. Maybe some slide guitar would be good. Maybe let's add some mandolin. And then I finally listened to the final product and I was like, my initial idea was to keep this pared down, and now it's just sounding crazy. Like, it's cool, but it's not what I was wanting. And so, like, exactly. And so we yanked a whole bunch of stuff out. I had to apologize to people. I was like, I'm sorry, you're on the cutting room floor. It's not personal. You're talented. I love you. But it just wasn't, I wasn't feeling it.
What do you want to emphasize? Because like every song is like, it's a sound painting. It's a painting.
Yeah.
And it's certain, like, luckily we have the ability to kind of pull strokes out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Where the painter might have to kind of change the color or overlay it. Maybe they wipe it out. They change something around. You can. But the idea is so personal, like when you get into music, like where you're coming from. And I think about being an independent artist is you can stay more aligned with your vision and not get torn into like the trap of the, trying to be hip or trying to be relevant to whatever the A&R people say is relevant versus what you think you want to say,
Right. Exactly. What I find to be relevant, what my truth is. Yeah, exactly.
But I want to actually take this time to actually go into one of your tracks from your new album. So I got it up and hopefully this will play right because I did test it before.
Okay.
And this is The Misery of Place. And so maybe do you want to preface it before I play it?
Sure. Yeah. So this song came from long time ago. It's funny because I'm not even in touch with these people anymore. But a long time ago, a friend of mine was in college. She was born and raised San Franciscan, which is very rare. They're about as rare as born and raised New Yorkers. And she went to college on the East Coast. She wasn't enjoying herself. She was like, it's cold. It's different. I don't, the people are very, very, like rigid. I'm not comfortable here. She was close to one of our teachers. She emailed him and was like, hey, pep talk, like, am I being dramatic? Like, do I need to just stick this out? And he replied to her, you might want to consider whether what you're experiencing is misery of place or profound lifelong misery of self, which is a really brutal thing to say. And like, so she relayed this to me and I was, I was 17 years old. I was very indignant. I was like, that's a really, really screwed up thing to say. Like, that's not helpful. But 20 plus years later, I'm still thinking about that phrase, misery of place versus misery of self. And I think it's a really wise question. I've come to think that it's a really wise question because it's like a more brutal version of wherever you go, there you are. But it's also like, where you live and places you go. And this is sort of like the thesis statement of my record is like, these places do imprint on you, whether it's because of the climate, the atmosphere, the culture of the people there, and just who you become while you're there. And then you take that version of yourself and you go somewhere else. And then that place will impact you as well. So everywhere you go, you're not stagnant. It's not like,
you're gonna get affected by the environment that you're in.
Being miserable, I'm just gonna be miserable everywhere. Everything kind of changes you a little bit, and then you evolve, and then you go someplace else. So, and it kind of builds. So this song is sort of like it's the thesis statement of that idea.
That's awesome.
Love it. This is my one. I think this. I'm gonna say this about every song at some point. This is my favorite song on the record right now. For now.
Well, at least I found that. So here we go. I'm gonna play it right now. So we'll see how far this will let me play.
Okay.
Mr. Avant-Garde had his heyday. Guitarist in a band that was not great. What kind of sad sack has a tagline? Brooklyn marriage is gonna be to die. Always spinning your fall from grace on place. His lady wants a yard for their little boy. Now he's throwing up a chair, killing all the joy. Hitting on the girls, always wasted. His fault, but he still can't face it. Living your skin, yeah, give it a shot. It's a shame to see you holding to the thought that a brand new beginning will magically erase misery of place. Oh no, Mrs. Job Hopper's really hot stuff, chasing all the work that she'll never love. Ever in demand, but she can't see she's making her life a commodity. The family hoped that they would stay here. She's been pulling this crowd for nearly 10 years. When you're good at something you hate, true happiness is up for debate. You're always getting your fall from grace on a place. There's a better way through, but maybe you forgot. It's a shame to see you holding to the thought that a brand new beginning would magically erase misery of place. Living your skin, yeah, give it a shot. It's a shame to see you holding to the thought that a brand new beginning would magically erase misery of place. Oh, you know I've been there too. It's more than a backdrop for the pain and the love that we feel. Something we all want. It's for the picture we paint to be real. I gotta hand it to my father's sister. She took to Paris all the love we wished her. Living out the dream is the place to be, but feeling out of place, that's misery. Oh, misery. Oh, misery.
That was really great. What I like about it is like I'm a big fan of independent bands. You know, I grew up like alternative rock, like REM
Yeah.
bands who I'm just singer songwriters like Paul Westerberg from the Replacements, like the
Yeah.
Mold, Van Hart. Like I love independent musicians or people who have their own idea.
Yeah.
And to kind of go out there and do it, like the Talking Heads, David Byrne.
Oh yeah.
People will come up with like original thought, original ideas. And I like what you're doing is you're bringing the singer-songwriter vibe back into this like this indie rock kind of structure, which is not the thing that is the big thing today. Everybody's into electronic, EDM, hip hop. Those are cool genres, but I've always loved what you can do in rock.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's so many people that are like, "Oh, the rock is done." So what do you feel about people who say that? I mean, you're in the genre with it. You obviously don't think it's done.
People who say rock is done, I don't know what they're listening to. I mean, that's my first question is like, what are you listening to that makes you think that you can say rock is done? Because that's absolutely not the case. I mean, that's and I mean, I feel strongly about it because I have my origins is in classic rock, but it's also just like the bands that I really liked when I was coming up. I'm a child of the 90s, so Gin Blossoms and Jane's Addiction and stuff.
People telling stories in music, and not just like we kind of gotten into this era of I feel like it's like the 50s where people are just doing these kind of like one-hit wonders.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I like the age of the singer-songwriter, age of the progressive rock band, like the Yes, the Genesis, the Pink Floyd, people who would actually, Funkadelic, they would come up with like Mothership. It's like people who would do these like really grandiose things, and then going into things like Sun Ra, infusion, jazz. It's like people who have ideas, like Coltrane. Go and do something and say something important, like a Love Supreme. People had something to say. And they actually want to put effort into it. Like I mentioned, like Paul Westerberg, like the idea that really replaces it was a singer-songwriter telling stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
And where are the stories?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's what I mean when I say, like, someone says rock is dead. I'm like, what are you listening to? Because it's probably not a story. It's probably not saying anything that
Yeah,
important,
it's more like the
and that,
hook. You
like
seem to be stuck on the hook. Like everything's about the hook.
about the
It's
hook.
not
Yeah,
it's not about the story. And it's like
exactly.
that's fine if that to me is like the listener has kind of gone away from the Springsteen, Westerberg, Lou
Yeah,
Reed, somebody who actually is gonna write something that's gonna draw you in like a filmmaker or like an
yeah,
author reading a book, like
yeah,
Steinbeck or something. You like think
yeah,
about Dylan and Springsteen to bring you into this idea like songwriters can be like Steinbeck.
yeah,
They can be like Orwell,
exactly.
they can write something big, important.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I love about, Bob Dylan does this, but Springsteen has I don't want to say a recurring cast, but he's got like a cast of characters in his songs. Like he's, Mary and
Yeah.
Wendy and Terry, Bobby Jean, and that was, and I love that, his songs, some of his songs are literally just like, they're like sketches and slices of life, and he's
Mhm.
saying something important, but he's telling it through like, here's a story about these characters, and I'm singing to Wendy, I'm singing about Mary. And so that was, when I think about, I wasn't necessarily sitting down when I was coming up with the ideas for what Misery Replaced would be about. I wasn't sitting here thinking I'm going to do my version of a Springsteen song. But what ended up happening was I started thinking about stories, people that I've met who've
Mhm.
struggled with this idea of, is this place making me miserable, or is it what I'm bringing to myself making it miserable? And it kind of became this, it's like a collection of little vignettes about, like Mr.
Okay.
Avant-Garde, terrible band, and he's unhappy in his marriage, and he's hitting on all the girls, and everyone's like, or the job hopper who's ruining her family's life because she's uprooting them every time, and she actually doesn't like what she does for a living, but it's too late to make a career change. So it's like I tried to, I don't often do this. A lot more. My songs tend to be a little bit more personal and a little bit more like me singing about myself. This is one of the few songs that I've written that's kind of like there's a little bit of me. I come in at the end in the bridge saying, "Oh, I've been there too," but this
Mhm.
is sort of like
You're
my
telling a
version of
story.
like, here are my characters. This is my
You're a
sketch. This
character and
is
you're
my
telling a story. Kinda like Dylan tells these characters,
yeah,
they
yeah,
like, like, "I got a lot of money and they get idiot wind."
yeah,
It's like, "Oh, I didn't kill her." Like, where'd
yeah,
I get the money from? But he tells these little stories, these vignettes, they're all over these stories.
yeah.
And he's able to and a lot of times he has, like, maybe something that's personal in it,
Absolutely. Yep.
but
Yep.
he's able to create these characters, and he has
Yeah.
this vision to kind of subtext, there's maybe something about him, like, everybody says, like, Tangled Up in Blue is, like, about his divorce. But he's,
Right.
like, talking about all these characters. They're
Right.
outside of himself, but
Right.
then kind of relating to himself. And
Right.
that's, like, the really great talent of an artist that you're in there, but you
Yeah.
can present it with these other characters,
Yeah.
you know, and give it a different frame, so it's not just about you, but you can those singer-songwriters will talk about themselves a lot of times.
Yeah.
Is them, but
Yeah.
it's how they tell the story and how they
Exactly.
relay the emotion.
Yep. They're using the character kind of as a vessel to tell
Yeah,
the emotional truth of what they're trying to convey.
you maybe have a
Um,
little bit of separation so it doesn't seem like, it's so obvious it's about them.
right. Exactly.
But you said, like, your influences like Dylan, and
Um,
Springsteen.
yeah,
Yeah.
my touchstones are, Dylan obviously is up there, like I said, the Beatles are very much my origin story. I wouldn't be a musician if it weren't for the Beatles. I took piano lessons as a kid. I really didn't like it.
Mhm.
But my dad wanted me to learn music theory because
Yeah,
he
it helps
learned
you
it
write
by
the
playing
song.
the violin. Yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing. I hated my piano lessons, but all these years later, I'm grateful that he made me do it because that music theory came in handy. And then, but like my mom introduced me to the Beatles, and I remember I want to say I was like 6 or 7, and that was like I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and it was I heard Paperback Writer for the first
Mhm.
time,
Yeah,
and
that's a great one.
the bass line comes in Paperback Writer is this like cool little stabbing, throbbing thing that comes in like after Paperback
Yeah,
Writer.
yeah,
It's like
McCartney's
there's
created those, like, 3
exactly. And I
3-minute
heard that
instruments.
like stabbing little bass line, and I was like, what is that? that is what I want to do. And then I was like, I want to be a bass player. I want to be in bass lessons. And my mom was like, why do you, she was a progressive lady for the most part, but she was just kind of like a girl playing electric bass. Like, really? Like, why don't you just stick with the piano? But years later, I was like, nah, I'm going to be a bass player. I'm going to learn how to do it. And, I bought a bass. I started taking lessons. I started, I have found that as I was learning how to play bass, it's so much easier to learn how to play when you're playing with other people. I feel like sometimes with instruments like piano or violin, they can be very, that can be solo instruments. You can go out on a stage and do like a piano
bass,
concert.
you have to kind of play with the drummer. You have to play with the guitar. You have to play with every other people building the song.
Exactly. And then I learned how to play the bass so much faster than I would have if I just gone and sat down with a teacher every week and like, okay, here's your lesson and here's your homework for the week or whatever, just kind of being, stuck in a group and like, all right, we're gonna play, we're gonna learn how to play Some Girls cover to cover. All right, go and listen and come in and what figure out what you're gonna do with with those bass parts and how you wanna make it sound. But yeah, that was the very, very much, like the Beatles are my origin story. Bruce Springsteen is somebody who I came to, later in my 20s. My boyfriend, I guess he's my partner. I don't know. I'm at a point where I feel too old to be like my boyfriend because we've been together forever. But he's a big Springsteen fan, and he really got me into Bruce and into really appreciating him. I think I had an idea of who Bruce Springsteen was, which was just sort of, maybe even based on like the inaccurate assumption of what Born in the USA was about until I started listening to what he was.
Yeah. When you start listening to like The River,
yeah,
you go into like some of the deeper stuff he does, like Nebraska, and you get into the depth of his songwriting. I was just impressed with his ability to kind of turn a phrase, and it wasn't a clone of Dylan. It wasn't a clone of Neil Young. I can listen to Neil, I can listen to Dylan, I can listen to Springsteen, and they're in different spaces, though everybody wants to say they're kind of in the same, and they're not.
They're not. No, I mean, they're definitely in conversation with each other if you want to, and that's kind of one way to put it. Like you can see how
they influence each other. Yeah,
they're influenced. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, they're definitely not the same thing, But when I often think about, like there is a through line from like, Arlo Guthrie to Bob Dylan to Pete Seeger to Bruce Springsteen. There's a through line, but there's like everyone, they all kind of did something a little bit different.
Yeah, everybody have their own flavor. They have their own characteristic that makes them unique, And I was drawn into like bands that were not successful, like the Velvet Underground.
Yeah,
and Alex Chilton's Big Star. I'm big. I don't know, in Sun Ra. So like three groups that did not get the popularity until like later. They weren't initially famous at the time. They become like legends after the fact because of critics and because of people saying, "Oh, this stuff is great." Well, when they first put it out, people didn't think it was great. But they were tenacious and they still were out there and they still continued. So they eventually, people started to realize that they're brilliant. And so I was kind of drawn into these kind of people who were really like struggling in a way, but making a statement. And it was kind of like that underground vibe or the kind of college radio vibe.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's, that's very much my experience as an independent, unlabeled artist is, I don't want to say that I'm struggling and people hate my music. The people who listen to it seem to like it, but I'm going to keep doing it, whether I become super famous. I don't know if I want to be super famous. It looks stressful. I don't think that I want to.
There's a whole deal with that. Like, sometimes you don't want it.
But like if mainstream people like my music, cool. If not, I'm still going to make music. I'm never not going to make music. It's there. I'm always going to keep doing it. And whether people like it or not, I'm going to keep doing it.
You never know, because your point, like with the sync licensing today, what are your songs? Somebody picks it up and puts it into a video game, puts it into advertising, puts it into a movie. You get put into an indie film, and then boom,
Yeah.
like sometimes that would happen with like some independent artists would they get picked up and like, I think that happened with Paul Westerberg. He started getting put into like films.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
his stuff, and it kicked off a little bit, but like, yeah, that's not always the goal. I mean, I always talk to artists and people who don't drop. I knew a bunch of guys when I was 17, and they played guitar when they were 17, and now it's in the basement, and they never picked it up, or they sold it, or they never touch it again.
Yeah.
I was one person. I have to touch the keyboard. I have to be on my roll, and I have to play my Moog. It's like whether I'm going to be playing a gig or not.
Yeah.
I'm usually in my room playing it like a lot more than what people would think I would do.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I'm sitting here, and this is kind of like my home. I work from home. In my other life, I'm an accountant, which is funny to me. I don't know if it's just kind of a weird dichotomy. But
Makes sense to me.
this is my this is like my workspace. And immediately here in this direction, I just talked about how I didn't like taking piano lessons, but I do like noodling around on a keyboard, and I have an electric piano literally right here.
Right
and
over
so
there.
when I want to take breaks at work, I want to walk away from the screen for a while, I literally just slide the chair over.
Like me,
and
I go
then
walk behind me and I jump on my
Yep.
Juno or jump
Yep.
on my Moog, and this because I just have them hooked up to multi-tracks, so
Yeah.
I just can boom, I can hit the button and I would just noodle. And a lot of times the noodling, I go back and listen to the tapes. Like I always would read about Zappa, and Zappa used to tape like everything. He would tape stuff on
Yeah.
stage, tape stuff
Yeah.
here, and then go and listen in his living room and kind of look at, oh, this goes with this goes there. Very non-sequential way of
Yeah.
coming up with ideas. And I find that works very well because like sometimes you don't know.
Yeah.
Like something might not be working today, but then if I take something I did 3 months ago and say, oh, now that works with what I'm doing right now.
Kind of
And then you
acting
get a
like
big
stumble upon.
archive and you just start working,
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's and I mean, like, and also it just keeps me sane. Sometimes I'm just like, if I'm,
You need that.
living, yeah, it's like I'm living
cathartic, right?
to the day. And
Cathartic
it's nice
to be a musician, right?
yeah, exactly. And then I've got my bass, I've got my guitars here too, but it's like and I don't practice as much as I should with my. I could play 3 chords on the guitar, which probably all you need. That's what they always say. But I make sure it's not even with intentionality. It just kind of happens. When I need to take a time out from the day job, the health insurance job, I think of it as the health insurance job.
Yeah.
And I just need to step away for a bit, and then just
It's
the
good to
keyboard
have
is
a good day job because the starving artist kind of mindset is like, well, I gotta live in Soho and
oh
live
yeah,
a
yeah.
bohemian life. And like there was this whole idea like in the 70s and 80s, like that's what you got to do.
So otherwise you were a sellout. Yeah.
Yeah, but like there's a lot of indie musicians like we got. Like I'm in software design.
Oh,
But,
cool. Yeah.
so I can't. I mean, I can't afford my Moogs unless I had some money.
Exactly. That's the musical instruments are expensive. That's the thing. It's like you want to
you're self-funding your mastering and all this stuff, and
exactly
before you go anywhere. So I mean, it's a love. I mean, I think of artists, we do it. I talk to any like art creator, like a painter, photographers, unless they're professionals, like they do it because they love it, and it happens. Sometimes there is a period where something you do connects with the world, like a law of attraction, and then that becomes the thing that works. Like, but not everything you do works. Like, not everything you do is going to grab people's attention.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff you do will, and so you just keep on going out there, and you find, who's your tribe, right?
Right. Exactly.
But it's like the idea of being a creative, like writing. I started with poetry because I
cool.
like Victorian poets like Tennyson, Wordsworth.
And
wow! I like Blake, and I like the Harlem Renaissance poets. And I said, well, I like that form.
Yeah.
But music is, lyrics in a song are different than like reading William Blake. William Blake is closer to like a song. Like William Blake's poetry sometimes can work as a song.
Yeah.
But some poets, like their stuff is like too verbose. You got to get inspired from it and then kind of pull out what will actually work lyrically.
Tear it down a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But then you've got Bob Dylan winning the Nobel Prize for literature because of his his songs, which are
his poetry.
His song is poetry, yeah, exactly.
Well, you can actually get to that level.
Yeah. I love that story about it's so him, and this is one of the things I love about him. I love the idea. I mean that he won the Nobel Prize, and they wanted to call and tell him he won the Nobel Prize, and he wouldn't take the call. And I was like, that's just so Bob in
That's
the
super
best
cool.
way. That's like it makes me love him even more.
Yeah,
Then
I
he was
think
like,
they were asking him one time, like, could you write the way you did, like on Blonde, like that time period, like in the like 66, 7, 68. And he was like, I can't do that anymore. Like, I don't know how I did. He couldn't figure out how he did it,
"Mhm,
but he does. He still is very creative today. He said, well, I do it in a different way today, but I can't recall that moment. I can't bring back that magic that created
right,"
those
because
type of songs.
he was in a. I mean, it's like he was in a different place. He was younger. There's different stuff going on in his life. He was just in a different headspace. I mean, I think that's what's cool about seeing artists like him or artists like Bruce, as they get older and what the new stuff that they create in conversation with their older material. And like the stuff that Bob Dylan or Bruce Springsteen is creating now is very different from, something classic like Blonde on Blonde
Yeah,
or
yeah,
Born to Run, Nebraska, but it's coming from the perspective of, okay, now I'm an
yeah.
older
You're an older
person and this is
person.
what I
Yeah.
have to
It's
say.
like wherever your muse is, like the thing about being an artist, right? Is that we can pull the inner and the outer. We pull the
Yes.
subconscious and then the external. And the
Yes.
great thing about creatives is like there's like this synergy between that. And
Yeah.
it's like and somehow it's like we get these downloads, but there's a lot of subtext from our subconscious. And so like the
Mhm.
thing we give us we give ourselves the permission structure to create.
Yes.
We're more willing to dive into the subconscious,
Yeah.
dive into that turn of a phrase, like an artist, like you pointed out, that song that we were talking
Yeah.
about. It's like
Yeah.
we're very good observers of
Yes.
things. Like writers will pick up phrases, moments, conversations, articles, different things, and they
Yeah.
just like synthesize this. Oh, I can pull this out of that,
Right.
and then
Right.
I can give it this frame. Right, you can
Right.
frame it. And so it's like we're always pulling things from what's inside out in the world and what's inside of us. And
Yeah.
that's I don't know why like AI to me, I don't know if people are, oh, AI is going to replace the songwriter.
No way.
I don't think so.
I mean, if they do, they're not going to replace them. They're not going to replace us. And whatever they do create is going to be crappy. I mean, I'll be honest, because they're probably going to try to recreate like what's
What's
in
been,
pop
but
culture
whatever.
now, like
Yeah,
that
it's
kind
just
of deal.
gonna if you just want to recreate whatever's gonna get you in the top 10,
Yeah.
whatever's gonna get you the most streams and the most money, so you get 200 million streams. Is that 200 million streams something that's actually valuable to like artistic mindset
Exactly.
versus
Yeah.
like something going listen to something Lou Reed wrote,
Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
Alex Chilton did, like on Big Star Third, like
Yeah.
Kangaroo or something. Like I rather get something like Alex Chilton being upset with himself and upset with his thing, and listen to the emotional like breakdown of an artist creating something kind of like when Neil Young did Tonight's the Night.
Yeah.
That kind of
Yeah.
falling apart and putting it on record and just being able to capture that moment as an
Yeah.
artist. AI is never going to do a Tonight's the Night. It's never going to do a
Because it's
Kangaroo.
not it's that emotion, it's that human thing. It's
Yeah,
that it's like
it can't have
that
that. It's not going to know
exactly,
that.
like it's like, and that's, I mean, that's what, and any great art, music, writing, film, whatever, like there is a human component to it. It has to. If it doesn't have that, nobody's going to connect to it. You're not going to,
Yeah,
that's, you don't feel it. You don't, and if you don't feel it, if you're not feeling anything from the art you're listening to, or you're consuming, reading, listening to, then it's not really art. I mean,
like a
I
widget. You're selling a widget.
exactly.
It's like a
The
junk food
widget,
widget.
yeah,
It's like
exactly,
people might like that junk food, but
yeah,
it doesn't really say like it's not like when you go to a really good diner or that
yeah,
really good restaurant where that chef does something just right, and it's not a
yep,
chain. It's just like this guy, like Northampton, Mass, or this restaurant
yeah.
in this corner in Boston. That's the thing, right? That's the thing. Like
And
I
like
don't
it
need.
nourishes you from like like on a really deep level, like whereas the midnight Taco Bell is great in that moment, but
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
gonna
There are a lot of
that's not
people will go to
gonna
that Taco Bell.
yeah,
But
Yeah.
it's that food truck, that local thing that's nowhere else that you go drive to because it's nowhere else,
Yeah.
and because you're trying to satisfy your soul, and that's what
Right.
I think. Like music from independent writers and artists like yourself, it satisfies the soul because there's so much commercial stuff that we're being sold that we
Yeah.
want to get something that's real, and that's
Yeah.
why I like to talk to people like you because you bring the real.
I try to. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely. I love your approach.
Mhm.
In a world where things are just singles, you got an
Yeah.
album focus, and so
Mhm.
I'm just gonna plead to the audience. Like I like to bring new people to my audience and get people to check it out. I want
Mhm.
everybody who's listening to this or watching this to go to your website, click on it, pre-order the album when you have it available, listen
Mhm.
to your catalog, and dive into an artist that's actually saying something. In a world where we have people that just do it for some slogan or whatever term gain,
Yeah.
you're doing it because you have a passion for it, and
I have a
that's what
passion for it, and I have stuff that I want to say, and then going back to what I said in the beginning, I write about grief and nostalgia and happy stuff too. I don't want to sound like I write a bunch of just like sad, depressing stuff. I mean, the
no.
song you played was kind of perky, but again going back to like I want to be the person that I needed to have when I was growing up. I want to be an example of like, this is somebody who can be, open and grounded and, emotional and like have something of substance to say about issues that are difficult to talk about or,
Mhm.
things that, people are uncomfortable talking about. That's very much kind of my wheelhouse is like, let's put it out there. Let's talk about it. Let's think about it.
And
And
inspire other people to realize
yeah,
that you don't have to be the biggest thing under the sun to actually make a statement. The music
exactly.
is not. Um, I think there's people who think of music as a professional class that you've got
Mm.
to be like a Hendrix, you got to be Coltrane, you got to be
Right.
Davis to be even have an entry fee. And I
Right.
think that people should go back to more of a punk aesthetic where,
Mhm.
like, you can be a Joey Ramone. You can say, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just going to go out and do it because I feel it. Right. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Paul Westerberg, I became Grant Hart and Bob Mould. I can go out and just do it because I feel it, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
that,
Exactly.
or like Juliana Hatfield, Liz Fair. Like I
Sure.
love, I think a
Yeah.
lot of the young women who came out in that kind of riot girl alternative movement,
Yep.
that I still, L7, you get, a lot of interesting bands. That female songwriters, I've been had a focus early when I had the podcast that giving
Mhm.
female songwriters kind of like a forum because I didn't think a lot of podcasts were actually talking to them because everybody's talking to these like EDM DJs, these like male folk, alpha male hip hop people, and I'm like, no,
Right.
like, why can't we have other types of musicians? Why can't we talk to other people?
Yeah.
Uh, and I think you need to hear as many voices as possible. So,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
for being on the show today, I do encourage everybody to check out. Yeah, and your new album, when's it drop?
It drops officially on August 22nd, 2025. It's called This Place. That's the full album. I've got Misery of Place, that first single that's out right now. And my second single called For the First Time. That's the Twinkly Catskills song that's out as well. And I'm going to have couple more, maybe a couple more dropping before the full album drops. I'm trying to get people excited.
Yeah, you got to
You
put the
know,
singles out. Yeah. So
exactly.
Bandcamp
But yeah,
is that the primary distribution?
that I would say Bandcamp, everything eventually. I mean, it's all on your streaming, your streaming platform of choice. I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple Music, I'm on Amazon.
Mhm.
I would love it if people went to Bandcamp because that's,
Yeah.
it's nice to get some money sometimes, but I will
Yeah,
not book
I do.
anybody
Yeah, I
who
do
wants
want
to
to
stream.
remind people that artists do need to get compensation for their work. If you do go to Bandcamp, the artists will get more. And
Yep.
people need to understand that, like, we're not just all billionaires,
Yep,
And
I
they-
wish, but
if some people get this, don't understand like the situation in music, and if you really love the artist, support them on the platform that helps them keep on writing.
Yep.
And Bandcamp is one of those platforms. But I want to thank you for
Yeah.
being on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me. This was a fun conversation.
Thank
Nice
you.
to talk to somebody who's kind of on the same wavelength. So very cool.
Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.